Hey Optimancers, Chris here. So, when I released my video on the new fighter in the playtest, something funny happened, and Pack Tactics released a video on the fighter within minutes of mine, and yeah, we didn't quite align on our takes. Speaking of which, if you are already not a subscriber to Pack Tactics, you should really check him out. I'll be referring to two of his videos today, and I will be linking both of them in the video description. Though I am interested on your opinion. Are marshals still bad, or does the fighter dish out the damage? If you want the fighter to dish out the damage, and you're not subscribed to this channel, vote by subscribing. So in my video, I was noting how the fighter class and the champion class had been boosted in power, but also how the fighter will be more fun to play. Weapon mastery is a huge boost. Remember, this isn't a replacement for another feature, it's just a new feature. This gives the fighter the chance to gain an additional benefit when they use a weapon, and depending what weapon they choose, the benefit is going to vary. So you can choose a mastery that's going to increase your damage, or you have other options as well. You can have your weapons push the enemy, slow the enemy, knock them prone, impose disadvantage on their attacks. There's a fair amount of versatility here as well. We have been pining for years that some kind of Battle Master-like maneuvers should be built into classes like Fighter, and in some ways, that's what this is. Battle Masters have maneuvers that just increase damage, like Precision Attack is a damage booster by giving you more hits. Weapon Mastery has options that just increase damage, like Vex, which also gives you more hits. Battle Masters have Brace that can provide you additional attacks. Weapon Mastery has options that provide additional attacks, like Cleave. Battle Masters have Pushing Attack that can push an enemy up to 15 feet if they fail a saving throw. Weapon Mastery has Push that can push an enemy up to 10 feet, no saving throw. Battle Masters have Trip Attack that can knock an enemy prone if they fail a saving throw. Weapon Mastery has Topple, same thing. Not saying that Weapon Masteries are maneuvers, I mean, Battle Masters have defensive options that Weapon Mastery doesn't. Weapon Mastery can slow an enemy, which Battle Masters can't. Battle Masters can often add their superiority die to the damage, depending what maneuver they're using. Weapon Mastery doesn't have anything like that. Weapon Mastery, at least until higher levels for Fighter, requires that you switch out your weapon if you want to access a different effect. The big advantage of Weapon Mastery, of course, is that it's not a limited resource. You can apply it to every attack that you make with your fighter. Of course, a playtest fighter that's also a Battle Master can combine maneuvers and Weapon Mastery. Here's my point. If you were one of the players who wanted fighters to have maneuvers built into the base class, well, you got a fairly solid version of that. Then as I went through the fighter, I saw boost after boost. Weapon Mastery became more versatile. Then it became more powerful. Second Wind was better. Indomitable, way better. The fourth attack comes at an earlier level. And probably the premier feature, in my opinion, Unconquerable means your fighter may never fail a saving throw for the rest of the game. So the fighter is just better. At level 1, it's better because of Weapon Mastery, and then at high levels, it's much better than it used to be. Then I went through the champion, and compared it to the 5th edition champion. Again, it's just better. It has more skills. It gets the additional fighting style 4 levels earlier. It can provide itself advantage on a check every combat. Its capstone comes 4 levels earlier. It's boosted in power, and has a fun interaction with the new rules on death saving throws, where you just won't stay down if you're knocked to 0 hit points. Then I did some damage calculations and I found that the new fighter and champion outperformed the old versions pretty substantially at level 13. Another thing about the new fighter, you don't need to take crossbow expert, sharpshooter, and a hand crossbow. There's reasons why you might use any number of weapons. You might even go melee, and there's no must-have feats to make the fighter work. These are all huge selling points as far as I'm concerned. So I was impressed across the board, and that was the basis of my video. So that brings me to the video from Pack Tactics. Why did he come to such a different conclusion? Well, he did actually a follow-up video to explain the difference. He agrees that the base fighter has been boosted. He points out that my damage calculations were just a snapshot. 1 level, 1 build, 1 subclass, 1 percentage chance to hit assumption, and he's right. I provide 1 data point, and although I think it's a pretty compelling data point, if you change the variables, the damage increase is going to vary as well. For example, I use a 60% base chance to hit. If you increase that percentage, then the -5 to hit plus 10 damage options perform better comparatively. And that is absolutely true. It also means the archery fighting style combined with sharpshooter performs better than Great Weapon Master, which is what I used in my comparison. He also presented some additional data points. He does a comparison against a 5th level edition fighter using a hand crossbow, archery fighting style, and sharpshooter, and although the new fighter still outdamages that build, it is much closer. And so those are some more data points, and I've seen many others from other sources. And of course, the assumptions that all of us use are different, so we get varying results. But for the most part, what I've seen is the new fighter compares favorably to the old one, despite the loss of the -5 to hit for +10 damage options. Though it does seem to perform better in melee now than ranged, and all I can say to that is, good. Then he came to the main point of the video. Okay, maybe the new fighter is improved, but it still can't compete with spellcasting. He points out that, sure, at 13th level, the new fighter gets some cool weapon mastery interactions, but a warlock can just cast Simulacrum and double their attacks with Eldritch Blast, which would outdamage the new fighter. And that's the issue he was addressing in his fighter video. Sure, the fighter is better, but spellcasters got stuff too. If the martial caster divide is to be addressed, then spellcasters shouldn't be getting anything and probably should be having things taken away. So what is the martial caster divide? It's the theory that in D&D, spellcasters, like wizards and druids, are so much more powerful than non-casters, like fighters and barbarians, that they can outperform them in every way. I saw a lot of talk about the martial caster divide after the expert class playtest, when the -5 to hit for +10 damage options were removed from Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter. The removal of these options meant the martial caster divide was increasing. Now, Jeremy Crawford said not to worry about the loss of these options because the damage potential of these options would be worked into the classes themselves. Now, I loved his explanation as to why these changes were made, so I'll play this clip and you'll see I'm on board.
Another question that's really common is great weapon fighting and sharpshooter. So these feats have damage bonuses, many of which people enjoy, with a little bit more risk-reward kind of action in their mechanics. Why was that changed?
We want our warrior classes in particular to be able to rely on their class features, which, remember, are going to include some of these awesome new weapon options. We want them to be able to rely on those for their main damage output.
It sounds like there's going to be class feature stuff in the warrior classes that are going to help replace the fact that we don't have the -5 +10 options anymore in Sharpshooter and Great Weapon Master. And if that's the case, I'm thrilled. My main concern is the stuff you're going to put in those warrior classes good enough to replace those things? So that, I guess, we have yet to see.
We do not want any feats to feel like you have to take them to be dealing a satisfying amount of damage.
100%.
So really the issue with those two feats was twofold. Again, it was too easy to make the penalty to the 2-hit roll trivial, and those two feats with those really enticing damage bonuses in them almost became must-haves. And that for us violates our design goal for feats, which is we always want you to feel good about the feats you took, but we don't want you to feel like you must take particular feats to hit a baseline level of whether it's damage output, or if you're a healer, the amount of healing you do, or if you're an expert and you're much more about versatility. We want you to go to feats because there's a particular angle you want to accentuate, not because you feel like I've got to take this feat to even be able to show up and do my job.
So I've been harping on must-have options, especially in my videos over the last couple months, because it just bothers me more and more that we have these things that you just have to have. And Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter are fantastic examples of that, where we have parties that it's all the weapons are hand crossbows and polearms. So I am thrilled to hear this. This basically, he's parroting my feelings on this matter 100%. So this has been my favorite part of the video so far, just to hear him say that. And now I know what he was hinting at: weapon mastery. Weapon Mastery removes the situation where a player must have a certain feat to perform well. Whether the data shows that Weapon Mastery outperforms the -5 plus 10 options, or it merely performs as well as those options, depending on all the variables, Jeremy Crawford was right. The damage potential, whether it's equivalent or greater, of the -5 plus 10 options was built into the classes themselves with Weapon Mastery. And now, after the most recent playtest, I've been hearing about the Martial Caster divide again. Not just from Pack Tactics. Sure, fighters and barbarians got new goodies, but casters also got new goodies. And the goal should have been to remove the Martial Caster divide, or at least narrow it, in this playtest document. And that the designers didn't shows that the Martial Caster divide will be as big or even a bigger problem after the new Player's Handbook is released. So, is the Martial Caster divide even a real thing? Is it a problem? Is it something that One D&D design should attempt to narrow or eliminate? Well, in my opinion, yes, yes, and yes. So I'm going to make my case here that the Martial Caster divide is real, and is a real problem, and why the designers should at least narrow that divide in the updated game, and why I didn't address that in my fighter video or my wizard video. First off, let me explain the terms. When I say martial, I mean a character that doesn't cast spells. When I say caster, I mean a character that primarily uses spells. So classes like Paladin or Ranger, they don't really fit into either group. They're more in the middle somewhere. So when I say spellcasters can outperform martials across the board, let me explain. I'll start with the things that spellcasters do that martials just can't. Utility spells could provide the ability to breathe water to the entire party. They can get the entire party flying. They can help the party communicate over a long distance. They can help the party travel across the world. They can help the party locate objectives. In addition, utility spells can replicate or even improve upon things martials can do. You want to be sneaky? Well, a good stealth score works, but spellcasters can exceed that potential with spells like Pass Without Trace, Invisibility, Etherealness, etc. You want to check for traps? Well, you can carefully inspect with Investigation or Perception, or you could use spells like Find Familiar or Animate Dead to just safely trigger the trap while the party waits a safe distance away. You want to open a lock? Well, you can attempt to pick that lock with your Thieves' Tools, or you can automatically open it with a knock spell. You want to charm the bartender so they share some confidential information? Well, you can attempt a persuasion check, or you can use the spell to literally charm them. Utility spells are a big part of what it means to be a spellcaster. They give the spellcaster abilities that martials just don't have, and can replicate and exceed abilities that martials do have. Now, sometimes these spells are a limited resource, and in those cases, I think it's fine. But sometimes they aren't. Cantrips often provide strong utility, and ritual spells are almost always utility spells. Then we have combat ability. So there are spells that just plain shut down some fights round one. Wall of Force can just end a combat. Hypnotic Pattern, depending on saving throws, can shut down combats too, because if that first saving throw is missed, they never get another one. Winning combats on round one by casting the right spell is just something that no martial can replicate in any way. Spellcasters can do it, martials can't. Then there's the area of effect damage spells. Fireball may not do a ton of damage to a single enemy, but if you hit enough enemies with Fireball, that is an amount of damage that dwarfs the damage potential of any martial. Martials have very few area of effect options, and those don't come close to competing with some of the spells. But the specialty of a martial is to deliver concentrated damage to a single enemy. And that's an important role, because there's always that, big villain, and being able to concentrate damage on them is really impactful. Sneak attack, reckless attack, extra attack, martials can hit an enemy hard, then potentially hit the same enemy again and again, all on the same turn. This is the thing that martials are best at in combat. I played in a one-shot with the Dungeon Dudes and D4 Deep Dive, where I demonstrated how a druid with Conjure Animals can outdamage any option using a weapon, and it's not even close. There's other spells that also outdamage martials even against single targets, and these tend to be spells that really let the spellcaster abuse the action economy. Animate Objects can do this, Animate Dead can, as can Tiny Servant, Simulacrum, and more. What about tanking? Aren't martials better defensively? No, they're worse. yes, they have some more hit points, but marshals use weapons, and generally weapons that require both hands to be available, preventing wearing shields. Then casters are wearing the same armor, but with shields, and then spells like the shield spell and absorb elements, all on top of that, and casters end up being more resilient than marshals. But what a spellcaster can also do is present new targets. The cleric can cast Conjure Celestial and summon a Coatl. It will likely be immune to enemy attacks, then it can change shape into any humanoid or beast with a challenge rating of 4 or less, and retain that damage immunity. How can a marshal out-tank that? And that's what's meant by the martial caster divide. Marshals just can't compete with what can be achieved by spells, really, on any front. This is an issue a large contingent of players, including me, want addressed in One D&D. At the very least, and I mean at the very least, it shouldn't get worse. If it does, I don't really see the point in using the new rules at all. It's a death nail. Then Playtest 5 comes out, and wizards can now enhance their spells and copy those enhanced spells into their spellbook so they'll always be enhanced. Lots of metamagic options. We're boosted in power. So a lot of reaction to the most recent playtest is that this is a really bad sign that sorcerers and wizards got any new class features at all. The warriors getting new and better stuff only really addresses the martial caster divide if spellcasters don't. If anything, full spellcasters should be nerfed, not boosted. The designers had their opportunity here to address the martial caster divide, and they didn't do it. That's the reaction I've seen. That's not my reaction. This might be a hot take, but I think spellcasters should get new goodies that make their base classes more interesting. I support the boosts to several metamagics. I support the new class exclusive spells. Now there's details that still need addressed. Modify spell and create spell, they need a redesign. But I do support their existence in the game. Because although I do agree there is a martial caster divide, and I agree it needs addressed, the Expert Classes playtest document wasn't the place to address it, and Playtest 5 wasn't the place to address it either. The problem with the divide isn't, nor has it ever been, an issue with the class features column on any spellcaster. Now there is some subclass stuff, but nothing on the subclasses in the playtest. It's not even on the spell slots per level chart. Casters getting these features and getting this number of spells is not an issue. The martial caster divide is not an issue caused by class features. It is caused by spell design. If a race car has an unfair advantage because of the rockets they attach to the back of the car, the solution isn't to pop the tires. The solution is to remove the rockets. The martial caster divide is a problem created by some spell design. I say some spell design because most spells don't contribute to the martial caster divide at all. D&D has spells that are too weak, spells that are fine, and spells that are too strong or abusable, and that final category is actually the smallest category. If this was the best preparation list you could put together for your wizard, then the wizard wouldn't be the most powerful class in the game, and we wouldn't be talking about the martial caster divide at all, or maybe we would, but we would be saying that martials are too powerful. And when Jeremy Crawford says that many groups play without feats, and they don't seem to think that Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter are required for fighters to be good, here's what I think. If you don't play with feats, then you probably aren't into squeezing everything you can out of your available options. And in that case, the spellcasters probably aren't selecting the too powerful spells. And so they will have a different perspective, because the power of spellcasters isn't built into their classes. It's built into what is actually a fairly low percentage of the spells. It's a potential power that some players use and some players probably don't. And if they don't, then there is no divide. I was recently talking with some other D&D players, and we all kind of agreed that slow is a good spell. But slow has never been a problem at any of our tables. Really, slow is just about perfectly designed because it's impactful, but it doesn't end the fight. It helps marshals do their job. A slowed enemy can still do stuff, and they get a new saving throw to end the effect at the end of each of their turns. Slow gives your allies an advantage in combat, but it doesn't win the combat. The list of spells that are just fine is huge. There's also a huge list of spells that probably aren't powerful enough. Melf's Acid Arrow, is an example, is a second level spell, and it's probably going to be outdamaged by marshals that aren't using resources. There's even worse examples. Weird is a 9th level spell. Yet now, paladins at 9th level, 9 character levels, can outperform this spell, and it's not even close. Then we have spells like Dust Devil. If you cast Dust Devil in combat, it will likely do nothing. Nothing at all. So underpowered spells, they are out there. But then there are spells like Shield, Web, Conjure Animals, Polymorph, Wall of Force, Mass Suggestion, Simulacrum, Maze, and True Polymorph. That's not a comprehensive list, but there are spells that are outliers, and these spells are what create the Martial Caster Divide. If these problem spells are addressed, then it is going to be debatable whether a Martial Caster Divide even exists. If the best thing a 5th level wizard can do is casting Slow, or a spell of equivalent impact, and the level 5 barbarian is reckless attacking through those slowed enemies, what we have are 2 roles in combat where neither overshadows the other, and they're complementary, and there is no divide. Now, I have mentioned this before, and the pushback I received was that the designers themselves told us to use any rules and options that aren't in the playtest documents as written in your 2014 Player's Handbook, and that's how we should evaluate the playtest. But there is a big difference between using spells as written for now and assuming spells will all stay the same. There are 79 pages of spells in the Player's Handbook. That's more pages of spells than pages of all the classes and all the subclasses in the Player's Handbook combined. You cannot reasonably come to the conclusion that Banishment, Spiritual Weapon, Barkskin, and some cantrips, and they're done. The spells playtest or playtests are coming. There is no doubt. And once the playtest for spells comes out and we start to see these outlier spells and we see the new design for these outlier spells, that's when we're going to know. That's when we'll know whether the Martial Caster Divide got bigger, stayed the same, or got smaller, or eliminated entirely. Because that's where the Martial Caster Divide is. It's not in the wizard. It is not in the fighter. It is in the spells. And we haven't seen the spells, but we will. Now, there's another thing I should probably mention here, and that is that when I talk about the Martial Caster Divide, and I talk about the spells that cause the Martial Caster Divide, well, those spells that I'm talking about, spells like Web, spells like Conjure Animals, spells like True Polymorph, these spells are all in the Player's Handbook. Pretty much every spell causing the Martial Caster Divide can be found in the 2014 Player's Handbook. And that means that when we get a playtest covering the spells in the Player's Handbook and what's going to be in the new Player's Handbook, we should see all these spells in a playtest. And I would expect there will be redesign. And we'll be able to make some real evaluations at that point. We'll also be able to help guide what those spells are going to look like through our survey responses. If someone was speculating that an upcoming race that their son is competing in is unfair, because although they don't know who their son is racing against, maybe they'll be Usain Bolt, and that would be unfair. Well, I guess it would be. But let's see if Usain Bolt signs up first. We have seen very few spell redesigns so far. Way too few to make any conclusions. Banishment was nerfed, now providing a saving throw at the end of each of the target's turns. Spiritual Weapon now requires concentration. We might wonder if other spells will be providing additional saving throws or becoming concentration spells when they weren't before. But it's all speculation at this point because we haven't seen the real outlier spells yet. Pack Tactics use Simulacrum to show that the new fighter is outdamaged by spellcasters. If Simulacrum appears as is in the new Player's Handbook, then he is right. But do you really think that Simulacrum will appear as is in the new Player's Handbook? Do you really think Conjure Animals will appear as is in the new Player's Handbook? I think they'll be redesigned, and I think their power is going to be scaled back. Jeremy Crawford said in a video I reacted to just last week that there are some things in the game that simply need to be reined in, and they will be reined in regardless of survey responses, though the surveys may be used in determining how they're reined in. In his example, he was referring to twin spell metamagic, but a lot of spells fit into this category, and my expectation is they will get the same treatment. And so when I look at this class chart, I don't see anything about the Martial Caster Divide here. The Martial Caster Divide was never going to be addressed here. And when I look at this class chart, I don't see anything about the Marshall-Caster divide here because it wasn't going to be addressed here either. These are irrelevant. And I think Pack Tactics and other people talking about the Marshall-Caster divide know the issue is the spells. I think they know that, so I'm not sure why they're presenting these class features as the issue. The class features that we should be talking about are spells, and we have yet to see the problem ones, but we will. So I am looking really forward to seeing how outlier spells are handled in whatever playtest we see them in. But until that playtest comes out, the Marshall-Caster divide isn't something that's been addressed or even should have been addressed in the material we've seen up to now. Or at least that's my opinion on the matter. So, hey designers, we would love to see some more spells in these playtests, and you viewers can be sure I'll analyze what's presented. But until then, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you to Airhead, Alex R, Vo, Bloody Nine, Artherizone, CJ, Chris C, Clement Brunette, Coral, Dank Train, Dewey Cheatham and Howe, Douglas Reynolds, Eden the DM, Eric Wasserman, FBKO5, Gishlife, Lightfoot, Heisenberger, Jay Gemmel, James Makla, James Sprague, Jean-Baptiste Blanchette, Jiriru, John Matera, Jonathan Zucker, Joseph Van Horn, Justin Times, Lars V, Mark D, Mark Sexton, Math Guy Dave, Mr. Brett, PCZ, Quicksilver HG80, Ramen Goblin, Scott Parsons, Sig, Tazel, Thunderlock, Vu, and William Whittles.